her off artificial nutrition and hydration, and she eventually died something like 13 days after that, I think is what it was. So here you have the vegetative state. Now, I'd like to emphasize how things have changed in the past 5 years. And they've changed because of some fundamental discoveries using a functional MRI machine. And this is an image taken from Owen et al. Owen et al. Is a very, it's a paper published, I believe, in Science, where they took an individual in the vegetative state and put her into an MRI machine. Now what you have here on the left-hand side are the brain signals of a fully conscious, healthy individual who has been told to imagine that he is playing tennis. And when you imagine that you're playing tennis, a particular region of the brain associated with motor function lights up. Now, what you can then do is you can ask this healthy individual and say, now imagine walking through your house. And when you actually engage in walking through your house mentally, different areas of the brain involved in spatial imagery light up. Now what they did is they took an individual in the vegetative state and they put her into an MRI machine and they said, all right, imagine that you're playing tennis. And to their surprise, they noticed that the very same parts of the brain lit up. Then they asked her, imagine going through your house. And you see, the patterns are comparable. Now this is an individual who is completely incapable of communicating. Apparently, she's not aware. And yet here, using this MRI machine, we were able to talk to her, suggesting that she is at least as conscious as my freshman students. See? Now, what's fascinating is about a few months ago, they published, another group published a paper where they were able to use this distinction between motor imagery and spatial imagery to start talking to someone. And so they said, if you say yes, we want you to imagine playing tennis. If you want to say no, we want you to imagine that you're walking in your house. And they put a patient, a young man, into the machine, and they started asking him questions. And they asked him about, do you have a brother? Is your brother's name such and such? Are you such and such years old? And the answers correlated. Every time it should have been yes, it was motor. Every time it should have been no, it was spatial. So all of a sudden, we are faced with the reality that individuals whom we thought were completely vegetative, as in vegetables, unable to be conscious, are in fact in some rudimentary way conscious and aware. Now, let me put some caveats. It's clear that not every single person in the vegetative state is probably going to be in this way. Just like if you take in any generic freshman class, some are much more aware than others. And I use that not to make it light of it, but what I want to emphasize is that in any disorder or any damage, you're going to have a very wide range. And some people are sicker than others. And so, but what we have a situation here is, until the advent of this technology, the assumption was anyone in the vegetative state was simply gone, right? And we simply gone. We don't know that now. We don't know that now. And what's so striking is for the past 20 years, we've simply taken individuals in the vegetative state off life support. Can you imagine? Can you imagine if some of them just were conscious in this way? They needed water and food, and they could not say a thing. But they could hear you. They could hear you. They can understand what you are talking about. And they understand, I mean, the suffering, I mean, the great cross. I mean, and so I just wanted to show this to you to highlight where we are now with regards to this question. Now, in contrast this to the minimally conscious state. In the minimally conscious state, what you have is some minimal awareness. And these are some of the things that doctors are looking for when they're looking for awareness. So, sustained gaze at moving targets, reaching for and grasping offered objects, speaking a few words, gestured responses, emotional reactions appropriate to stimuli. So what you have here, again, we are talking about a range. So we're not asking for every patient to have every single one of these. We're saying that these are indicative of awareness. And so this has been used to diagnose and to distinguish the vegetative state from the minimally conscious state. And this is what I want to emphasize, right, is that you have a continuum, and that basically you and I move up and down this. So we can put sleep somewhere. Sleep is probably going to be in here somewhere. But what happens is that you can be conscious, and then you have an accident, a vehicular accident. You end up in the PVS state. Then as your brain heals, you start moving up and you wake up. But you could also have a situation where you have the PVS state, and over time your body deteriorates further, and you end up moving towards brain death and eventually death. So there's a dynamism up and down the continuum. But that's what I wanted to emphasize, is that this is not a static condition. People are moving back up and down. We call that healing and the grace of the Holy Spirit, right? Yes, ma'am.
I was going to say, I work with people in all of these states all the time because I've done end-of-life care for over 30 years. And sometimes things happen that can amaze you.
Oh, absolutely.
With them that are unpredictable, that doctors aren't aware of, and that, I mean, I've worked with the diocesan home, so it's been in a Catholic facility. So it's one of those things where people and families have come together to support their loved one, and a lot of times it's like they're a living soul within their body, and God has granted them life, and they're there, and they're having a quality of life with their family that is very, very good, you know, despite everything. But recently, a friend of mine, his wife was 42, she had an accident, was in the hospital. The doctors deemed her brain dead, and he was given the choice of taking her off life support, and he did, and she lived for another up to 20 hours, and then she had complete eye contact with him. He knew she was there, and then she died. So he called me on the phone because he graduated from high school with me and talked to me about it. And I didn't want to give him my opinion either way because he is now left without his wife there. But this is a situation that just happened a few weeks ago. You know, so this is the dynamic that we're in.
And it's unfortunate because we're economic concerns from life concerns. There is increased pressure on individuals, on families, and our culture to, in a sense, accelerate the process that goes from here to there. And that's just what so my take-home message for this first part, the science part, is that things have changed in the past 5 years. The categories are not as defined as they were even in the time of Terri Schiavo. Now it's really interesting because, you know, one of the things, from what I understand, the debate over Terri Schiavo was her family wanted her to be put into an MRI machine, but her husband refused to put her into an MRI. It was just I mean, it's one of the things because her family wanted to ask whether or not she was in fact in the minimally conscious state versus the persistent vegetative state.